This is a special report for the Rio Grande Guardian. We're in San Juan, Texas. We're at Rio Fresh. There's been a private meeting with all the farmers and the ranchers. They've been meeting with the new Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, plus U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, plus U.S. Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz. And the big issue, of course, is water, the water crisis we have in the valley, and a determined effort. Senator Cruz, Congresswoman de la Cruz said there's a special effort now, a concerted effort in D.C. from the White House to get Mexico to comply with the water treaty. In addition to that, Secretary Rollins announced that there'd be funding coming, emergency relief in the way of funding for our South Texas farmers.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be back in the Valley. It is great to welcome my dear friend, the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, here. Brooke and Monica and I, we just finished a roundtable with farmers and ranchers here in South Texas. It was a very productive conversation. Much of the conversation was listening to the concerns of ag here in South Texas and concerns that run across the board, but nothing is more important than water. And we're facing a water crisis in South Texas, and it is a water crisis that is man-made. It is a water crisis that is the direct result of Mexico's refusal to abide by their treaty obligations. In particular, the Water Treaty of 1944. Under the terms of that treaty, Mexico is committed to providing 350,000 acre-feet of water a year, and Mexico is badly in arrears. Right now in this 5-year cycle, Mexico is behind 1.3 million acre-feet of water. The result is devastating to South Texas farmers and ranchers. It is devastating. We've seen the sugar mill here close its doors because of Mexico's refusal to abide by that treaty. We are seeing farmers and ranchers, just about every farmer and rancher around the table, describe the acres that they're no longer farming because they don't have the water to farm it. They describe the workers that no longer have jobs because they no longer have the water to farm as South Texas needs. Now, I'll tell you, I've been working hand in hand with Monica de la Cruz, who is a ferocious advocate for South Texas. Monica's doing a fantastic job fighting for the farmers and ranchers here. I've been working hand in hand with John Cornyn, fighting for the ranchers here in South Texas. And I'll tell you, in the previous administration, I had pressed repeatedly for the previous administration to lean in with Mexico to force them to meet their treaty obligations. And unfortunately, those efforts did not produce results. In the Biden administration, this was not a priority. Last year, I forced a vote on the Senate floor to direct the State Department to make this a priority, to fight for Mexico to honor its obligations under the 1944 Water Treaty. We got a bipartisan majority of the Senate that voted for that amendment, and yet the Biden administration continued to fail to deliver on this front. But I got good news. There's a new administration in Washington. The world changed on January 20th. I can tell you, I have had multiple conversations with President Trump, with the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and with the soon-to-be new ambassador to Mexico, Ron Johnson. Those conversations, water, and using every point of leverage we have to force Mexico to comply with the treaty has been front and center in those conversations. And I'm here to tell you right now, I believe with President Trump in office and the new administration, we are going to get the water. Mexico is going to comply. Ignoring the treaty will no longer be an option for Mexico. Now, there's also more immediate news. In December of last year, I authored a provision of legislation in the continuing resolution that was passed in December of last year, directing the federal government as part of emergency disaster relief to provide relief to the farmers and ranchers here in South Texas, specifically targeted for those farmers and ranchers who have been negatively impacted by Mexico's failure to abide by the 1944 Water Treaty. The language that I wrote into the continuing resolution was taken verbatim from language 20 years ago that then Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison had passed into law in a previous iteration of this battle. We took that legislation, we put it into the CR in the House. Monica de la Cruz led the fight in the House to get it passed in the House, and we got it passed into law in December. Now fast forward to the new administration. The new administration, President Trump, has named a phenomenal cabinet, and there's no cabinet member I'm more proud of than our Secretary of Agriculture. Brooke Rollins and I have been friends for 25 years. Brooke is a Texan. She is a multi-generational farmer and rancher. She is a diehard Aggie. I've said many times, she literally bleeds maroon. Don't demonstrate it here, but she loves Texas A&M. By the way, her son is the brand new Yell leader, which is a big damn deal. Congratulations. And she is the first Texan in history to be the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. That is incredibly important. And when Brooke and I sat down with her confirmation, it was great because when you have a dear friend that's going into the cabinet, there's much cause for celebration. But the central issue we talked about was the provision of the continuing resolution that we had passed into law directing emergency relief for Texas farmers and ranchers. And so in a moment, Brooke is going to be here, and Secretary Rollins has an announcement to make that is going to make a real difference to those farmers and ranchers who are hurting. But before we bring Secretary Rollins on to make that announcement, I want to welcome your Congresswoman and ferocious advocate for South Texas, Monica de la Cruz.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you all so much for being here today. This is a great day for South Texas. It's a great day for our farmers and ranchers in our community. For the first time that we can think of, we have a Secretary of Agriculture right here in South Texas, right here listening firsthand to the needs and the concerns of our South Texas farming community. That being said, I am humbled to represent this region. And when I first became elected in 2022, the number one issue that was affecting our South Texas communities was the 1944 and is the 1944 Water Treaty and the lack of compliance by the Mexican government. This has been devastating for our farmers and ranchers. We've lost our sugar mill, and we are on the verge of losing our citrus industry as well. This not only affects our farmers and ranchers, but it also affects our municipalities as well. This is a critical time, and a year from now, if we do not have water, we will be in a doom and gloom state right here in South Texas that will not only affect our farmers and ranchers, but will also affect communities like McAllen, like Palmhurst, San Juan, Alamo. This is not only a local issue, but this is a national issue. And the reason why is because our South Texas farmers, they take great pride in not only feeding our local community, but also feeding our nation. When we think of fresh citrus, when we think of sugar, it's not just eaten right here in South Texas, but it's eaten and it is consumed all over the United States. Food security is national security, and getting our water back from the Mexican government is of utmost importance. That being said, I do want to say a couple of words in Spanish quickly, because I know we do have some outlets here that are Spanish speaking. So, I'll say, estoy muy feliz de estar aquí con la secretaria Brooke Rollins y el senador Ted Cruz para escuchar a los agricultores y hablar de nuestro trabajo para ayudar al sur de Texas. El año pasado conseguimos $280 millones para ayudar a los agricultores de nuestra comunidad por la falta de agua que el gobierno de México no entregó. El gobierno de México debe más de $1 millón de acres pies de agua. Esto ha causado una crisis en nuestra región, especialmente para los productores de cítricos y azúcar. La agricultura es muy importante para el sur de Texas y esta ayuda es una solución para las familias de nuestra comunidad. And I want to say something. The water that Mexico owes us, and this is so important, I want the newscasters to hear this. What they owe us, the amount of waters, 1.3 acre feet of water, that could give the city of Houston water, for 3 years. That's how much water they owe us. Imagine that capacity of water to give to the city of Houston for 3 years. That is what the Mexican government owes us, and that is what we're asking for. And we're so thankful to the senator for his efforts on the Senate side to help us. And we're also very thankful for a change in the White House that is finally listening. And to Secretary Rollins, I can tell you that I've had close conversations with the president, President Trump, directly in the Oval Office concerning the 1944 Water Treaty. And President Trump has sent his deputy chief of staff, his legislative deputy chief of staff, to my office on the Hill to see about how we can work together to get the water that the Mexican government owes us. With that being said, I thank Senator Cruz for his efforts and working parallel with me in getting water from the Mexican government. And I very proudly would like to introduce my fellow Texan and your Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Monica. What an honor to be here in South Texas with all of you in my home state. A couple of quick things. First, a big thank you to Senator Cruz. As he mentioned, we have been friends and partners in crime for more than 2 decades. We have fought a lot of battles together, Senator, whether that's education opportunity for every kid in Texas, whether that's lower and less regulation and lower taxes, more freedom, more jobs, more prosperity. Going on down the list, we've partnered together for a long time. We even worked together at the Texas Public Policy Foundation years ago. But I believe very sincerely that there's no more important battle and no more important issue today than the one that we're here talking about. So, Senator, what an honor to be with you all these years later and to keep fighting for the great people of Texas. Congresswoman De La Cruz, there are no 2 greater warriors in Washington representing you here in South Texas than Senator Ted Cruz and Congresswoman Monica De La Cruz. And I know that, sometimes in politics we kind of talk hyperbolically and in big sweeping statements, and we're also honored to all be together. But I mean it very sincerely. There really are no 2 more fierce warriors than these 2 for what is right for the state of Texas, and specifically what Monica represents here down in South Texas. A couple of quick notes, and I'll make the announcement. First, this is my about 7th trip as the new Secretary of Agriculture. I've been in the office about 30 days, 7th state, I should say. But this morning, before I came here to this beautiful farm here at Rio Fresh, this morning I was in with the Border Patrol, and we boated up and down the river right here, a little bit separate from the discussion today, but while I was here, and as a member of President Trump's cabinet, and certainly one of his top priorities is border security. The men and women of the Border Patrol that I was with this morning, I want to thank them. I want to honor them. I want to talk about the amazing work that they do every day to secure this country and to keep our side of the border safe. One of the things that my wonderful tour guide, Officer Weeks, said was that before January 20th of 2025, in the 4 years prior, they were spending all of their time every day apprehending 300 to 400 illegal crossings. And since January 20th, that number is now down to 3 or 4 crossings a day in their part of the river. Policy matters. Real leadership matters. America and borders matter. And so I just want to say, again, what an honor to be part of President Trump's cabinet. I believe this is a historic opportunity to secure America, to put America first, and to ensure that everything we're doing in Washington, whether in the Senate, whether in the House, whether in the White House and in the administration, that we're always putting America first. And that's the reason I'm here today. We just finished, as Senator Cruz said, a really incredible roundtable. Whether it was talking to the extraordinary Schaefer family and their third generation of farming, hopefully forthcoming soon. Right here, we're on their property. We drove their farm, the onions, the cilantros. It was all so beautifully done. I just can't thank them enough. The Nash family, who's a sixth generation family represented by Courtney Nash today, an unbelievable operation. Talking to other farmers there like Bart, who's a seventh generation farmer. Sam, who's a first generation farmer but hoping for a second generation, mentioned that normally they've got, actually I think it was Bart who mentioned they normally have about 6,000 acres under production. They are 2,000 acres less this year because of the lack of water, and with no real solution in sight until this administration came along. They were considering what their next steps could be. So listen, y'all, this is real. It is today, and we are here to fight for the farmers and the ranchers of this area of the country. And as the Congresswoman said, it's not just about Sam or Bart or the Schaefer family or the Nash family or the other farmers that were in our roundtable. It's not just about them, but it's about feeding America, and it's also about national security. So the final thing I want to say is today, just an hour ago, we announced that the United States Department of Agriculture, thanks to the great warriors on my left and my right, will be dispersing $280 million in funds to the farmers of this area who have been impacted by Mexico's failure to deliver on their promises under the 1944 Water Treaty. We will begin that disbursement immediately. The way it will work is we'll block grant that to your great Texas Department of Agriculture here in Texas, and Commissioner Sid Miller and his team, we've got his team here today, will be the ones to begin immediately moving that money out. But listen, that's only a short-term fix. We know that long-term, that Mexico has to abide by those terms in that agreement, that the days of ignoring it, the days of ignoring NAFTA terms, the days of ignoring USMCA terms, the day of ignoring this water treaty are over. President Donald Trump is in the Oval Office, and he will not take anything but what's right for America every day, every minute, and that's what we're fighting for. Thank you all so much. I think we can answer a couple of questions.
Congresswoman, do you think it'll take diplomatically something to alleviate this problem that we've been talking about for a long time? What have you been discussing with time?
So look, it is going to take diplomatic efforts from both the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the President of the United States. At this point, I believe that it will be a president-to-president issue, and that President Trump, he is already engaged with our office. He understands the concerns about the Mexican government not fulfilling their obligation and the impact it is having on all Americans and food security. So it will take diplomatic relations in order to move the ball forward. Yes.
Secretary Rollins, you mentioned the $280 million in funds. Is that part of the $10 billion emergency commodity assistance program that was announced yesterday to help farmers and ranchers, or is that a different pot of money?
That's part of what we announced yesterday. But there's also another tranche coming, so details to be determined. A very quick note on what she said. I do believe that that's right. And listen, I've witnessed President Trump in conversations with the Canadian Prime Minister when he was very upset about 250% dairy tariffs with Canada. And he is in this, and he's in the details, and he understands what's at stake. But what I also want to outline is that this cabinet is different. We have all worked together. We all know each other. We're working across all of our agencies to ensure that the president's vision is effectuated. And so while our President Trump will be, I'm sure, speaking with the President of Mexico, if he hasn't already, I've already begun communicating with my counterpart for the country of Mexico. And across, whether it's our United States Trade Representative, Jamison Greer, whether it's our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, whatever potential opportunity we have to move this country's vision forward, to move the America First agenda forward, and to move President Trump's vision forward, we take that at every corner. So you'll see a whole of government approach to this massive challenge facing our state and facing South Texas.
Senator Cruz, Mexico has until October of 2025, basically this year to pay. So in reality, they're really not out of compliance. So what kind of pressure can the U.S. government put on Mexico to pay before the deadline. And Madam Secretary, if you don't mind, some local water districts have raised concerns that even if Mexico pays all the water, that wouldn't still be enough. We have to find additional sources of water. What is the plan?
Well, under the terms of the treaty, Mexico is obligated to provide 350,000 acre-feet of water a year on average. And we're at the end of the 5-year cycle. At this point, they are 1.3 million acre-feet behind. It is a massive quantity of water that they are behind. That is deliberate. That is not accidental. That has benefited farmers in Mexico and deliberately hurt farmers in South Texas. That is unacceptable. And unfortunately, with President Biden, we had a president who wouldn't stand up for South Texas. It was not a priority. I can tell you, I went round and round and round with the Biden administration, and they wouldn't lift a finger. Donald Trump, if you know anything about him, it is that he is ferocious in fighting for America. And so I have a markedly different level of confidence. I believe we are going to deliver on this water because I believe the president is focused on it. I believe the cabinet is focused on it. And at the end of the day, something Secretary Rollins said a minute ago is really important, which is Mexico does not have the option of ignoring treaties anymore. And that's true for our other trading partners, that ignoring treaty obligations to the detriment of Americans is no longer acceptable. It was never acceptable. But prior to January 20th, we didn't have a president who was willing to use all of the leverage that an administration has. I've drafted legislation that would put real and meaningful sanctions on the government of Mexico if they do not provide the water. I have urged Secretary Rubio and the president to use those sanctions. There's ample authority under the law to do so. When I drafted the legislation, it was to try to force the Biden administration to do it. I don't have to try to force the Trump administration to do it because they're already fighting for Texans. And look, I love the Valley. I love the people of South Texas, and I'm here to tell you my message is real simple. And by the way, it's the same message when I meet with any official from the Mexican government, when I meet with any Mexican business leaders. My message is real simple, which is give South Texas our damn water that is owed under the treaty. And I think that's a message they're hearing loud and clear.
One thing, let me answer that really quickly. The infrastructure and reservoir issues are real here. We talked earlier in the roundtable about the plans that are underway. I believe sincerely, if there is ever an opportunity to fix that, it's right now with this administration. As we are right-sizing government and shrinking government, what that allows us to do is to put efforts into things that are actually a real priority, not transgender grants for food justice in San Francisco or studying the menstrual cycles of transgender men. I mean, you can't even believe some of these grants that we've canceled, but for the betterment of all America, but from my perspective, for the betterment of our American farmers and ranchers. So thank you. Yes, let's talk about the food bank. So just last week, we canceled what would have been a third tranche of funding. That was a Joe Biden funding program during COVID that was only supposed to last for COVID. And billions were moved out. Program was supported, but at the end of the day, that last piece of it that we canceled, none of it was committed, no one was expecting it, no one was planning on it, and most of that program had come to an end, if not all of it. So the left-leaning media has obviously made a huge deal about us taking healthy food out of the mouths of children. That could not be more wrong. This was funding that had been set aside for a specific purpose during the Joe Biden era that had run its course, that was no longer needed. And unlike prior administrations, and I may say both Republican and Democrat, under Trump, when a program's goal ends, it's time to end the program. And that's what we did. So thank you for that question. Maybe two more?
Were you talking about certain tariffs? What would that push be like on Mexico?
Look,
the water.
The president has a host of lever points, and I'm not going to preview what leverage the president is going to use, but it is clear this is a president who knows how to use leverage, and so Mexico is going to comply. I am confident Mexico is going to comply, and I'll say, look, something else, because there was an earlier question about this $280 million being part of a larger grant of relief, and that's true, but I will tell you, The farmers of South Texas are the only farmers in the country that have this amount explicitly carved out by legislation. I drafted that legislation. Congresswoman De La Cruz fought for it in the House, and the reason it's carved out is because the farmers in South Texas are facing a unique harm, a harm caused by Mexico defying its treaty obligation. And so this $280 million, it's not going to solve the problem in the long term, but it is designed to provide immediate, much-needed relief. And Secretary Rollins is here today announcing $280 million are being released in a block grant to the state of Texas. The Texas Department of Agriculture will administer that money, and it is very much my hope that within 30 days from today, that the farmers and ranchers in South Texas have that needed relief in their bank accounts right now to meet their immediate needs. There is an urgency that we're responding to provide immediate relief. And then in the longer term, our focus is on fixing the problem. And the only way to fix the problem is to get the water.
Secretary Rollins.
Yes.
Thank you. Secretary Rollins, can I ask a question about the price of eggs?
Yes. Yes. Let's talk eggs. Who's ready?
Our local congressman said he's written to you about this. The idea being that we temporarily, for a short period of time, allow the import of Mexican eggs because in Mexico they're much cheaper. What do you think of that idea, and do you have the authority to do that?
So 3 weeks ago, the price of eggs, as a result and left over from the Biden administration, was around 237% higher than it was when President Trump left office 4 years ago. And so immediately, you know, it's obviously one thing for our egg-laying farmers and for our poultry producers, but that's something that hits the pocketbook of every American. The first conversation we had after I was sworn in was about ensuring and reassuring our farmers in this country that he had their back. But then we quickly pivoted to eggs, and he said, you got to go figure out how to fix this egg issue. Within about a week of being sworn in, we released our egg plan, which of course is driven by the avian bird flu for the most part. There's some other factors as well. And that plan included 5 different points. The first was significant funding into biosecurity measures to help lock the egg-laying barns down. The second was to allow the repopulation, which for the 158 million birds that were culled for the most part during the Biden administration, how do we get those birds repopulated and the new birds back in and laying eggs? The third part of the plan was deregulation, getting a lot of the Biden-era rules off of the backs of our poultry farmers, which we've already begun to do. We changed the line speed rule just 2 days ago. I announced that, I think, on Monday. And the fourth thing, to your question, was short-term imports. We have been talking to many countries and already began a couple weeks ago importing eggs from multiple countries around the world. As you'll see, the cost of eggs is now down almost 60% since we announced that plan 3 weeks ago. And the fifth one is research and development into the actual avian bird flu issue. But to your point, we are currently in conversations. The trade team at the USDA, in connection with, as I mentioned, across the cabinet, other key people are talking, in fact, today, almost every hour with other countries about whom else we can be importing from and importing eggs in so that we can keep bringing the cost of the eggs down. But that is a very short-term solution. The long-term solution is what we've kind of gotten our arms around. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
Really an honor to be here. Thank you all.